Show, the show where we speak about real shit. Welcome to the Nico Lagan Show, the show where we speak about solutions to the real problems our society is facing. No fluff, no political correctness, just simple truth. I'm your host, Nico Lagan. By nature, men are purpose driven. They need, or we need, a reason to live. We need something to do. We need something to chase after, something to become. And boys are no different. The only difference between a boy and a man is that a boy needs more guidance. They need to be shown the path to becoming a man. They do not know yet, but they need good men like you and I to teach them how to become a good man. And in today's episode, I want to speak about something that is very close to my heart. I want to speak about the tools we should be giving our young men and boys to become good men. What are the skills they should learn, and how can they learn those skills? One of the ways that we can do this is take an example as we can take example to most of society, if not every single society out there has used methods in order to teach their boys how to become men. Take the Spartan, for example. At the age of 7, the boys were taken from their house, and they were put under the responsibility of the state. Basically, the kids would live with their parents in their regular house until the age of 7. Then those kids would be taken away and be put under the protection of the state. If you look at the boys from the Mahasi tribe in the Sahara Desert, or not the Sahara Desert, my apologies, in the savannah in Africa, in order to become a fearless warrior, they would have to learn to hunt a lion with nothing more than a spear. And if we look at the Australian Aboriginal culture, boys between the age of 10 and 16 would go live into the wilderness by themselves for a period of up to 6 months. Those are what we call rites of passages. Those are what we call adulthood rites, more specifically. And I do believe that these type of rituals and ceremonies are needed today more than ever. And that is exactly what I want to speak about today. This is what really matters about this episode today. And maybe that one of the things that's not necessarily very clear right now is, what are the intentions of such rites of passages? What are uh, rites of passages in the first place? Because we hear the term. I'm sure that most of you have heard the term before. I've heard about rites of passages. Hold on. What do you mean? I look blurry in the video. Okay, but what do you want me to do about it? Is that just means our internet connection sucks? So, yeah, there's no point about you telling me this, because there's no, but there's nothing I can do about it, really. I appreciate it, but there's really not much I can do about this, except now you're just destroying my flow. The To go back to what I was saying, there, not that we are under the impression that there is no rites of passages anymore, because there are. We just don't necessarily see them as what they are. And there's specific intentions to those rites of passages. Those ceremonies, those rituals were put in place for a very specific reason. And as per French ethnographer and folklorist Arnold van Gennep, they consisted of 3 separate stages. The first step, or the first stage, being separation. The second stage being transition, and the third step being reincorporation or incorporation, if you will. It depends, but the point is the same. Basically, what this means is in the separation stage, you take an initiate, in this case, young men or boys, and you separate them from what they consider normalcy. So you, let's take, for example, the agoge, the rights to adulthood that Spartans had in their society. They would take a boy of 7 years of age, they would remove them from their parents' care and put them under the care of the state, basically causing a separation. They would be removed from what they consider normalcy and put into a world where they would have to learn. They would have to question themselves. And this takes on to the second stage, being the transition stage. This is a stage where the initiate went from what he considered normal to a stage where he is losing his sense of identity. And this is one of the greatest things that can happen to somebody. It has happened to me. I Until about 7 months ago, I decided to leave the city, which was Montreal, one of the biggest cities in Montreal. And when COVID happened, I was offered the opportunity, or I was presented with the opportunity to work from anywhere. It did not matter where I worked. All of my meetings went from face to face to being in virtual settings like Zooms, like Teams. So I was offered the opportunity to simply work from wherever I wanted. So what I did is that I moved to my investment house in the middle of nowhere. And when I say in the middle of nowhere, if you're not Canadian, imagine a log house on top of a hill in the middle of the woods. This is where I decided to move. So for me, this was separation. I went from living in the city where I had one of the busiest life that you can think. I was at the gym working, then I was teaching martial art at night. This was normal to me. This was my regular life. But by moving to the country, by moving to the woods, to my investment house, it created a separation from normalcy. Just like I was talking about with the boys of Sparta, they would be taken away from their family and plunged into a world that was unknown to them. The second stage, as I was saying, is separation. Now, separation is all about losing your sense of identity, about not knowing who you are anymore and transitioning to something new, to something better. But during that stage, you don't necessarily understand, or you don't understand what the end product should be. So you are not yourself anymore, and you are not yet something that you're trying to create, or something that the rite of passage is trying to create, which causes confusion, which is why you lose sense of who you are. When I lived in the woods for 2.5 years. The first 1.5 years or so, I spent it by myself with my dogs. And when you go from a situation where you're always busy doing something day after day, just my schedule was always busy. There was always something to my schedule, to a place where I can't go to gyms anymore. I can't teach martial art anymore. All of my job is done over an internet connection in my office. I don't have my support system, my friends. I'm literally in a position where I spend most of my time by myself. This, I think you can understand how this really creates a sense of confusion, if you will. It forced me to reevaluate everything that I believed that I was. The sales engineer that I have been molded in my head to believe that this is what I was. I wasn't Nico. I wasn't the man. I was a sales engineer for a telecommunication company. and I was very proud of it. This was my identity. But by moving in the middle of the woods, not only am I not a sales engineer anymore, but I'm not a martial art instructor anymore. I don't even train martial arts anymore because there's no gyms for me to go to. So everything that I've been associated with being me is gone. I cannot relate to this any longer. This is the second stage, the stage of transition. The third stage is the reintegration, the reincorporation within the society with your new status. What do I mean by that? Well, again, let's take the Spartans, for example, and the Agoge. They took a 7-year-old boy, they removed them from their parents, they put them into a situation where they would teach them the art of war. So they would teach them the art of war, they would teach them to read, they would teach them to write, they would teach them to steal, they would teach them to survive, they would teach them the skills that they needed to be able to survive by themselves. But also, they were taught that there was nothing more important than the state, there was nothing more important than Sparta. They were trained to put Sparta above anything else, even their own family. There was nothing more important than the brotherhood. The goal of that being to produce a perfect soldier. That was the goal. For me, the goal of moving to the woods was to rediscover who I had become after 10, 20 years of just grinding every single day. And I know I know that there, you out there that's listening, you can relate to this. You can relate to the fact that we are so stuck in our day-to-day grind that we are just doing what needs to get done. We're disciplined. We do what needs to get done in order to take care of our family, of our loved ones, in order to achieve our goals, in order to get better at what we do, that we tend to lose sight of who we are. And to me, this was my situation. This is what I was trying to change by unconsciously, if you will, put me through a rite of passage. So as I spent all of this time by myself, just like the boy spending all of this time away from his family, I learned the skills. I learned to recognize the skills that I already possessed, and the skills I developed skills in order to get better, in order to become something that I was not. In my head, I wanted to become a self-sustainable individual. I did not want to work for anybody else anymore. I wanted to be my own boss. This was the goal. This was the idea behind me moving away from the city. I knew that I had to lose myself in order to find myself. And there's no difference between rites of passages, the agoge, as I was talking about, how Spartans would take their boys and transform them into what they would consider the perfect warrior. That being said, one of the important things about the agoge that is worth mentioning is that during those, it would take 23 years. Like the agoge was something that lasted for 23 years until the age of 30, give or take. Those boys became men and stayed within this ritual. And only after that ritual were they capable of marrying and having a family. Before that, they couldn't. They had to concentrate on becoming the perfect warrior. And the same thing is true for me. I, in order for me to separate myself from my corporate job, I needed to find ways to lose myself, if you will, find myself again, and figure out how to become that independent person that I wanted to be. Now, if you look at our society, because right now I'm using a personal example, I'm hoping that this can somewhat make sense to you, because I think my idea or my story is relatable in a way where pretty much anybody could do this. Not everybody, uh, everybody could do this in a way where technically they're capable of doing it. Would they do it? Well, that's a different story. But the point is that there's nothing stopping most people from putting themselves in an uncomfortable situation in order to learn, in order to become something else, because this is the only way it's going to happen. And those rites of passages were used for exactly that. And every single historical society out there, past and present, had or have rites of passages. Those moments, those rituals are so important because they mark a transition. They mark a state where, in our example, a boy goes from being a boy to becoming a man, to becoming a good man, to becoming a functioning person of society, to becoming something or someone that society, their loved ones, their family can depend on. And Spartans wanted to create the perfect warrior. That was their idea from the beginning. That's what they did. And for almost 400 years, from 743 BC to 379 BC, they were the most feared warrior in Greece. They were the most feared warriors in all of Greece, considering that the Athenians existed, considering all the nations of fighters that were in Greece back then. It's incredible. And some would argue that they were the world strongest warrior. That was their goal. Their goal was to take something weak, like a boy, and turn it into something strong, like the perfect warrior. Because one thing you need to remember, we are all born weak, but staying weak is a personal decision. Staying weak is a choice. We are all born weak, but staying weak is a choice. This is why rites of passages are so important. And although we do have those rites of passages even here today in um, North America, in the Western world, we don't necessarily recognize them as rites of passages. But if you look at baptism, bar mitzvahs, confirmation, school graduation ceremonies, if you look at weddings, fatherhoods, those are all examples of rites of passages. You start with being something weaker, and you end up being stronger for the ceremony. The issue, though, with most of the rites of passages that we have here in North America is that there's not really the testing phase anymore. There's not really the time of transition where the boy is tested to a point that he is forced to change. Like a baptism is just a choice that your parents take. If you're Catholic, they just baptize you. There was no preset to that. There was no, you did not have to go through pain. You did not have to go through something that would make you want to change, that would force you in a situation where you needed to change. And this is what I believe is problematic today, which this is what explains why our boys are so soft today, because they're no longer tested. They are no longer put in situations where they need to prove to themselves, they need to prove to their families, they need to prove to their loved ones, to their community, to the society in which they live, that in order to become a man, you must go through pain. You must go through things that will test your might, that will require you to become courageous, that will require you to have knowledge required to get to that final stage of becoming a good man. And don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying that we should bring back the agoge. I'm not saying that we should snatch our boys from the house at 7 years old and plunge them into a world of violence where they would become the perfect warrior. This is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that we should, as a society, establish our own rites of passages that are more applicable to our times. Because look at the boys today. The, they're growing up thinking or being taught that magical places like safe spaces actually exist where unicorns and rainbows are everywhere, that nothing should trigger them, nothing should make them suffer, nothing should challenge them, that if they're scared of something, it's okay to just go hide from it and never learn to face it. The parents of today are teaching their kids that they are special, that just being alive is enough, that participating is all that is required from them in order to become something or someone that can deal with the harsh truth of today's world. Our world is not made of unicorn and rainbows. Our world is violent. Our world is a place that will kick you in the teeth, put you on your knees, and keep you there indefinitely if you let it. If you do not do anything about it, you will spend your days or the rest of your days or your whole life on your knees. So it is up to us to train our boys, to give them the tools that they require in order to be prepared for the harshness of this world, to the reality of this world. And protecting them with safe spaces is not the way to go. Trying to be friends with your kids instead of being the authority figure that they need is not the way to go. We need to teach them responsibilities. We need to teach them discipline. We need to teach them what they need in order to become good men. This is our responsibility as adults to teach them that, because there's no way they're going to find that out for themselves. Or if they do, it will take a lot of time that does not need to be wasted. So what am I proposing here? Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should bring back the agoge. But what I am saying is, how about we create some type of rites of passages that are more representing of our time today? This is what I propose. How about we instate a mandatory public service measure? So what do I mean by that? Let's say that until teenagers graduate or young men graduate from high school, they are under the care of their family. Obviously, they're going to school, they're going through elementary school, they're going to high school. Their parents need to stop treating them like children and give them the responsibility around the household that old boys had prior to the 20th century. We need to stop relying on just the government and the education system to make our kids better. But let's say that at the age of 16 or 17, when they do graduate from high school, that if they want to experience higher knowledge, if they want to be able to go into the workforce, if they want to have a family, get married, or even vote, that they need to serve their community first, that they need to participate at the local level of where they live before they are allowed the rights, or yeah, before they are allowed the rights to go to higher education, get married, have kids, or even vote. Imagine this for a second, that we would take a 17, 18-year-old boy, however old he is when he graduates from high school, and we would put him into boot camp. We would put him into the Army basic combat training, where he would learn teamwork, discipline, dependability, how to take orders and follow instruction, how to be coachable, survival skills, self defense, and he would learn how to handle a weapon like a knife, like a gun, all skills that are what we call transferable skills. There are life skills that are applicable to everything outside of the military. Those skills are skills that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. So let's say that for the first 6 months, this is what we're teaching them. We're teaching our boys all the skills that they can learn from the Army basic combat training. And then after 6 months, they're presented with a choice. They can either continue with their military training, they can continue being part of the military, or for the remaining 18 months, they could choose to serve their local community by doing community service. So imagine them finally understanding all the social services that we take for granted, like how the streets are repaired, like how our roads are maintained, how the electricity is taken from one point to the other, how it is to pick up garbage, how it is to distribute mail, all those services that we take for granted because we're never exposed to them, because it is something that's done behind the curtains, if you will. It has people doing it, maintaining it, building it without us being involved. So how about we show that to those boys, to those young men, what it actually takes to maintain, to build a society, to maintain it as well. It is not as easy as it looks. Good men are out there doing the work. So why not teach our boys how to do this as well? Not only would that teach them the value of manual labor, hopefully it would bring them a sense of belonging, a much needed sense of purpose. Because the whole point about rites of passages is not only to create something better than when you started, it is about giving that initiate, that boy, that man, purpose. It's, let's not lie to each other. Without purpose, a man's life is meaningless. So let's give our boys purpose, and the purpose to be part of something greater than just themselves. Being part of the local community could be one of the ways that we achieve giving purpose to our boys. So let me ask you this. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you think about rites of passages, about creating our own, something, as I said, that is more suited to our society right now. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I want to know what you think of rites of passages, and if you believe we should create our own, or just let me know if you think that's a viable solution, or am I completely crazy here? So let me know. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. And thank you for being here. I want to thank the listeners out there. Thank you for being there, because without you, there's no reasons for me to be here. And until next time, remember, evil only wins when good men do nothing.